Imagine if I had done any of this. Let me just, I just want to be clear about this. Imagine that.
Watch this before it's removed from YouTube. Former President Barack Obama delivered a powerful and revealing speech at Hamilton College, and America Uncensored is proud to bring you exclusive footage that you won't see anywhere else. This is classic Obama, thoughtful, sharp, and deeply relevant to the moment we're living in. You won't find this on the mainstream media, and you certainly won't see it outside of America Uncensored. The speech spans over an hour, featuring a raw, unfiltered conversation between President Obama and a college professor. We're sharing the most urgent and impactful portion with you right here. While we considered breaking it up into shorter clips, we knew that this message needed to be seen in full. The context is critical, and it's absolutely worth every minute of your attention. In this segment, Obama directly addresses the Trump era, reflects on the state of the nation, and speaks with a level of clarity and wisdom that is sorely needed today. This is more than just a speech, it's a moment of truth in a time of noise. So watch it and share it before it's taken down. America needs to hear this, and you need to see it. Here's the full segment. President Barack Obama on the Trump regime. Let's roll it.
So let me preface this by saying what everybody knows, which is I have deep differences of opinion with my most immediate successor, and who's now president once again. And so there are a host of policies that we could be discussing where I have strong opinions. But at least for most of my lifetime, let's say the post-World War II era, there was a broad consensus between Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, liberals, around a certain set of rules where we settle our differences. Right? That there are some bonds that transcend party or region or ideology. That there was a creed that we all stuck to. And that basic notion of American democracy, as embodied in our Constitution and our Bill of Rights, said all of us count, all of us have dignity, all of us have worth, that we're going to set up a system in which there's rule of law and separation of powers and an independent judiciary, and there are these freedoms, freedom of worship and freedom of the press, and an assurance that if we go before the law, that there will be an impartial process to make decisions. And we all stuck to that, more or less. It doesn't mean there weren't corrupt politicians. Didn't mean that there wasn't abuse of power in society itself. Obviously, there were vast differences in terms of access and influence and having a megaphone. But we all said, even though that ideal wasn't always observed, that was the right ideal to have. And I do believe that our commitment to those principles has eroded. And I think it eroded in part because the government itself got really big. And what that meant is sometimes it felt distant and unresponsive, and rules are a hassle, and some of the rules aren't smart, and people get frustrated. I think part of what happened also is that it's easier to observe, it's easier to agree to disagree and have forbearance to people who you don't agree with if they all sort of look like you. There's in the United States Senate, when I got there, I was the only African American. There was one Hispanic in the United States Senate. I'm not that old, so this is fairly recently. You had a sense of how different it was by looking at the men's gym in the Senate versus the women's gym. Men's gym, really big, and old guys walking around with not wearing enough stuff. And then the women's gym was like basically a modified closet with a bike, because there just weren't that many. And so during that period of our history, I think there was a general sense of, well, if I'm a Dixiecrat, Southern Democrat, if I'm a Republican from up north, if I'm this or that, have this or that perspective in terms of being fiscally conservative or socially moderate, we all went to the same club and we all talked about the same things. And then starting around the 60s and 70s, people crashed the party. And now it's a little harder to agree to disagree without being disagreeable if your sense is, well, that person isn't like me, doesn't look like me, maybe doesn't think exactly the way I think. I'm more prone to feeling attacked or threatened. And so that, I think, changed, it made us a little more tribal in our politics. And then the economy wasn't working for everybody. Now that, in part, had to do with the fact that government wasn't as responsive as it should have been, and inequality grew. And then finally, media. I think one of the most important aspects of our democratic practice is having a well-informed citizenry, which is reliant on a free, objective, effective press. And that started getting attacked. And so you combine all those factors together, and we saw it over the course of decades. But obviously it's gotten a lot worse now. And when I watch some of what's going on now, it does not, look, I don't think what we just witnessed in terms of economic policy and tariffs is going to be good for America, but that's a specific policy. I'm more deeply concerned with a federal government that threatens universities if they don't give up students who are exercising their right to free speech. I am more troubled. The idea that a White House can say to law firms, if you represent parties that we don't like, we're going to pull all our business or bar you from representing people effectively. That kind of behavior is contrary to the basic compact we have as Americans. Imagine if I had done any of this. Let me just, I just want to be clear about this. Imagine that imagine if I had pulled Fox News' credentials from the White House press corps. You're laughing, but no, this is what's happening. Imagine if I'd said to law firms that were representing parties that were upset with policies my administration had initiated, that you will not be allowed into government buildings. We will punish you economically for dissenting from the Affordable Care Act or the Iran deal. We will ferret out students who protest against my policies. It's unimaginable that the same parties that are silent now would have tolerated behavior like that from me or a whole bunch of my predecessors. So, and I say this not on a partisan basis. This has to do with something more precious, which is, who are we as a country and what values do we stand for? And now, this is not just an abstraction, and I think this is one of the challenges that we have. And I saw this even before the last election. I think people tend to think, democracy, rule of law, independent judiciary, freedom of the press, that's all abstract stuff because it's not affecting the price of eggs. Well, you know what? It's about to affect the price of eggs. One of the things that has distinguished us in the past has been this basic idea that we are a rules-based society. What that means is that, you know what, I can support one candidate instead of another, and I don't have to worry that the police are going to come harass me or my customers. That's what happens in other places. That's what happens in Russia. We take for granted the idea that we don't have to pay bribes or hire somebody's cousin in order to get a business permit. That's how we built the economy we did. That's why this place worked. And it has very concrete impacts on all of our lives. So, this is the first time I've been speaking publicly for a while. I've been watching a little bit. Yeah. Let me just close this portion of my remarks by saying it is up to all of us to fix this. It's not going to be because somebody comes and saves you. The most important office in this democracy is the citizen, the ordinary person who says, no, that's not right. And I do think one of the reasons that our commitment to democratic ideals has eroded is that we got pretty comfortable and complacent. You know, it has been easy during most of our lifetimes to say you are a progressive, or say you are for social justice, or say you're for free speech, and not have to pay a price for it. And now we're at one of those moments where, you know what, it's not enough just to say you're for something. You may actually have to do something and possibly sacrifice a little bit. So, yeah, if you're a law firm being threatened, you might have to say, okay, we will lose some business because we're going to stand for a principle. If you are a university, you may have to say, figure out, are we in fact doing things right? Have we in fact violated our own values, our own code, violated the law in some fashion? If not, and you're just being intimidated, well, you should be able to say, well, that's why we got this big endowment. We'll stand up for what we believe in, and we'll pay our researchers for a while out of that endowment, and we'll give up the extra wing or the fancy gymnasium that we can delay that for a couple of years, because academic freedom might be a little more important. For most of human history, and to this day in most of places in the world, there is a cost to challenging the powers that be, particularly if they're abusing that power. And this idea, and I've noticed this among some wealthier folks who, after George Floyd, they were right there, and a bunch of companies were talking about how they cared about diversity and they wanted to do this and they were all for that, and they are mute right now. But what that tells me is it was okay when it was cool and trendy. And when it's not, not so much. And that, I think, is what we have to, each of us has to examine in our own hearts. Is all right, we say we're for equality. Are we willing to fight for it? Are we going to risk something for it? We say that we're for rule of law. Are we going to stick to that when it's tough, not when it's easy? We believe in freedom of speech. Do we stand up for freedom of speech when the other person talking is saying stuff that infuriates us and is wrong and hurtful? Do we still believe in it? And that, for university students and for your generation, I think that's important, because part of how we got confused around some of these issues is that those who claimed to be fighting on behalf of social justice and freedom of speech and equality, sometimes we didn't observe it ourselves. I'm glad to hear that on campus here you focus on what Common Ground Initiative. I have been absolutely clear throughout my presidency, post-presidency, the idea of canceling a speaker who comes to your campus, trying to shout them down and not letting them speak, even if I find their ideas obnoxious, well, that's not only is that not what universities should be about, that's not what America should be about. You let them speak and then you tell them why they're wrong. That's how you win the argument. The sort of the delicacy of sensibilities in classrooms. Michelle and I talk about this all the time. Let me tell you, you will deal with people in the world who don't like you and say mean things about you. You better get used to it. Don't be in the classroom thinking, I can't be triggered, and then you think you get on the job. You will have horrible bosses on occasion, or coworkers who say obnoxious things. And it may turn out that in some cases they're actually good people that just didn't use the right word for something or need to be educated on something. Well, You need to get used to that here. So some of these principles are ones in which it's not just one side or the other that hasn't been true to I think our founding principles. I think in some cases we've all been guilty of it, some more than others, and it's important now for us to refocus our attention on who are we and what we believe.
So you mentioned...
And there you have it, a rare and unfiltered moment with former President Barack Obama, speaking with honesty, depth, and urgency. At America Uncensored, we're committed to bringing you the stories and voices that the mainstream media often ignores or suppresses. This speech wasn't designed to go viral. It was quietly delivered at Hamilton College, away from the spotlight. But the message is too important to be buried, and that's why we've made it our mission to share it with you, raw, complete, and uncensored. Now more than ever, in a time of division, confusion, and political chaos, we need voices of reason and reflection. President Obama's words in this clip are more than just commentary. They're a warning and a call to awareness. He challenges us to take a hard look at where we are as a country, and to not lose sight of what true leadership and civic responsibility look like. But make no mistake, content like this doesn't last long online. We've seen important footage like this taken down or buried by the algorithm. That's why it's critical that you don't just watch this video, share it. Pass it along to your family, friends, colleagues, and communities. Spread it across social media. The more people who see it, the harder it becomes to silence. If you haven't already, make sure to like this video, subscribe to America Uncensored, and turn on notifications so you never miss critical content like this. We're more than just a channel, we're a movement dedicated to truth, transparency, and accountability. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay informed, and most importantly, stay uncensored. This is America Uncensored, signing off.